Good evening and welcome to another episode of At Random. My name is John Wordsworth.
I'm Jackson Matthews.
And I'm Rick Timmis. So, welcome
It's
to
been a while,
episode 1 of Season 2. So, of course, new numerical naming convention already, just to keep the viewers and listeners on their toes, John. What do you say?
Keeping cool and hip in 2014, I like it.
Or we could be just ripping off the Ubuntu podcast.
Of course, now that we have seasons, we have to have a season finale where everybody gets killed, or they might get killed, like some sort of cliffhanger anyway. Otherwise, they won't bother tuning in for season 3. You got to do that. That's what they all do now.
What a good idea! Maybe we could have a season finale beer as well, couldn't we? We could, and you go at the end of the show like this. Wow.
Yeah, and a mid-season
Season finale beer. Sorry, I thought that was required for every show.
The finale of every show, yeah.
Well, with the cost of alcohol here in Sweden, would you believe how much I paid yesterday for a pint? So we went out first. A new job yesterday, which is pretty awesome, and we went out for curry at lunch, which is a very good sign. You know, when it wasn't even prompted by me, they just went, lunch? How about Indian? I was like, oh yes. So that was 90 krona for a curry, which is about £7.50, and it was a proper full-on. It came with a naan bread, a drink, a boona, rice, and they even had these little trays with shish kebabs on for £7.50. It's like that's a pretty bargainous and big lunch.
Yeah. Respect.
In the evening, we went out to this comedy show. I'll tell you more about that later in the show because it was horrific. But the upshot was we spent 75 krona on a pint, which was £6.20 for a pint of beer. Almost the same cost as a whole curry. There are cheaper places. This is the most expensive pint I've seen in Stockholm so far. Usually they're about a £5, I guess, but you can find places that are cheaper because it's kind of London prices, you know. So it's already big city prices. But you go to what they call the rough bars, but they're actually like British bars, all of the British bars.
Yeah, I would mock that price, but I think we'll be there soon, so I won't really say anything. I'll just get my head around it and get used to it, you know.
But, £6 a pint. That's just wow. That's unbelievable. I mean, I only go to Wetherspoons pubs now in the UK on account of, it's the same. It's like going to Aldi, you know what I mean? It's like pubs, only cheaper. But £6 for a pint, I'd leave the country. I'd be going, no, sorry, Sweden, that's it. I'm off. No good.
There is I can't remember what the chain's called now. There is a chain of pubs, and they do a pint for, it's about £2.40 or something. So you can find it. You can find the cheap beer if you look for it.
Well, so anyway, let's get into this a little bit more then. So, because you started this little section off by saying that first of all you're in a foreign land, and obviously clearly deserted and ran off with the Vikings, and you started a new job. So come on, John, whereabouts in the world is Mr. Wordsworth this week, and what are you doing? What's this new job?
Cool. So we currently live in Stockholm, and I'm now a programmer at Paradox Interactive Game Studio, which is pretty awesome. So,
if nothing else, it sounds good.
I need one of them on my soundboard. We need a soundboard.
But yes, it's pretty cool. I obviously can't say about it yet because it's just been 2 days of complete manic meeting everyone. But no, it's been really cool so far, and everyone there's really lovely. So, but it does, as you say. I think in saying what's changed since the last show, we have passed through England and decided to leave again and come back to Stockholm. Well, come to Stockholm as our next move. So, bishop to E4.
Yeah, I know what it is with you, John. It's because the beer's too cheap.
I thought I'd get here before England leaves the EU and makes it really hard to move countries.
Yes, come on, Mr. Farage, hurry.
Lock John out. Go on, get rid of him. So how about you two? What have you two been up to since the last show?
Well, let's. Well, in fact, actually, let's save the best till last. So I'm going to go first. Jack, you're going to have to. Because Jack's got awesome news, awesome news about what's been going on. But right, so lots change for me. I completed that project working for the European Parliament Minister Trevor Coleman, and that completed in June. Finished in June. The Unit UK website is still going. It's being run by the community. You know what I'm like for free and community type stuff. So it's being run by the community, and we're keeping that going. There's a few guys that are keeping the news up there, so people who want to know about the European Union and all of that kind of stuff and what's going on in the news can go to theunit.com, theunituk.com, and find out about that. So then I took the summer off, and me and the family went off for the whole summer holidays, which was just incredible. We went all across the southeast of England, all through the South Downs. We went to Battle of Hastings, you name it, Rudyard Kipling's house, Dover, White Cliffs of Dover. For nearly best part of 4 weeks, we were just out travelling around, wandering from A to B, and the kids had an amazing time. It was fantastic. So that was really good. And then I started a new job. Whoa!
Very exciting.
So I've taken on the role of product manager for a company called Wi-Fi Spark Limited, and they provide Wi-Fi, basically managed access Wi-Fi systems for conference centres, marinas, government departments, places like the NEC and National Health Service hospitals and things like this, and so that managed service has something called the Spark product behind it, and the Spark server is a big kind of management application that works with Radius and gateways to manage and control access. And so I've taken on the role of product manager for that. So I'm working with a small development team of application programmers, and I'm responsible as the go-between, really, between marrying up what the sales guys and the marketing guys and the business side of the organization wants, and translating that back into what the technical requirements need to be. So managing an agile Scrum team and that kind of stuff. I've been there 4 weeks. It is just awesome. It is so good. I get to sit behind a computer and just like blow my mind with all this really hardcore tech and just go and it's really good. So I'm loving it. Yeah, really, really good. So that's what I've been up to.
That's really cool. Jackson?
Well, let me see. I did the washing up earlier on, and that all got done. And there was some,
that's pretty exciting. I didn't know it was that exciting.
Well, no, there's more. There was some wet towels, and I hung them up over doors, and they dried pretty nicely. So all the towels are done now. And my wife is incredibly pregnant. In fact, we're just about to have our.
Where's my soundboard?
I found time for that as well between the laundry and the dishes, so I had a few minutes free. And,
really? Such a romantic at heart, aren't you?
There was a very romantic few minutes. But
45 seconds.
So she's right ready to go. I've got my phone next to me right here, just in case she wants to text me from downstairs and say, "Jackson, wrap the podcast up."
It could happen. It could happen. We could all of a sudden hold on. I gotta go. The waters have broke. And you're
we'll have to find.
Wow.
I'll find a way to segue into it.
It can be on air, Jackson.
Now this is good thinking, John. This is why I'm just a layman, and because I don't have these sorts of marketing ideas. Our first AtRandom baby.
It would be pretty random.
That's going to go. That'll go viral. That will.
Will go viral. Yeah. Right before my account gets deleted.
That's only Facebook that allow that sort of thing. I mean, if it was a beheading, it'd be fine, but you know.
Yeah.
Well, beheadings are not allowed.
Beheadings are in public interest.
No, they won't be having any of that on Google Plus and YouTube. That will be that's exclusive Facebook territory. That kind of nonsense, you know.
Yeah, and that it's probably that new exclusive Facebook that William Shatner doesn't like. I forget what it's called. It's something. I can't remember the name of it now. It's that thing where they use to. It's like a promoting certain people on Facebook, and like certain promoted people. It's kind of just an exclusive club for Facebook people. But William Shatner doesn't like it, so I didn't even give it another thought.
Well, perhaps William Shatner like
How can we...
you've got any tribbles. Maybe that's what we need. That's what we need. The birth of several tribbles, and then this new exclusive Facebook will be endorsed by Mr. Shatner.
Be legitimised, yeah. He could get into it. Just apparently he was a bit cheesed off because like one of the first people who got recommended to him was George Takei, and they don't quite get on him and George Takei.
Really?
I can't remember why, but it's some like it goes right back. I think they like rubbed each other up the wrong way or something. But
oh my!
Yeah, you watch the Star Trek movies again, and it gives them a bit of something. You know what I mean?
I can feel the sound. Hold on, where's the soundboard? Here it is. Shut up, Wesley. Oh no, that's Patrick Stewart. Sorry.
Right. If you're not as geeky as us, Rick, it's fine.
Yeah, terrible.
Cool. So, should we take this into a bit of old school and talk a bit about the old tech news that we've hit over the last few weeks?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that.
Old school.
So there's a couple of things that I think would be really cool to talk about. I think there's obviously the watch that Apple have announced, and then there's this Windows 9. Oh no, 10.
Yeah.
Right before 10.1.
So maybe we should kick it off with Windows, because I know that you love Windows, Rick, and you probably couldn't contain yourself if we pushed it back.
Oh no, I think we should push it back. Windows 9.
Maybe that's why they did it.
Come on. Tell me about Windows 9, and I shall prepare my counter argument.
So the Windows 10 tech preview was actually released a couple of days ago, so you can download it now and install the ISO if you want to. Well, if you want to play with new features and/or possibly bugger up your machine. So obviously, if you know what you're doing, you'll probably be fine. But if you're not, do it with a bit of care, is all I'm saying.
It's a crapshoot either way. Let's be honest.
Maybe back up your work first, even though the advice that everyone knows but nobody heeds. But no, so there's quite a few new features, and we'll maybe talk about why they possibly skipped the 9 number later. But a lot of the focus on Windows 10 seems to be around kind of trying to bring Metro and the desktop together. So, because obviously Windows 8 had this travesty of an idea of Metro, which actually worked really well on tablets because I had a Surface and that interface was great. But when you're just using it as a desktop machine, it was, I think, globally pretty well hated. So, Windows 10 it seems to be trying to merge the two back together in a kind of useful way. So they didn't want discard Metro apps because obviously they've been pushing developers to make them. Yet at the same time, they can see that people perhaps don't want to have to almost switch to tablet mode just in order to use these apps that they've downloaded. So they've done this in a couple of ways. They've brought back the traditional start menu. Oh, thank God. So the iconic Windows button in the corner where you click and the menu pops up is finally back, which obviously makes sense because that's what all our parents know how to use, and you give them Metro and they just go, what's going on? So that's kind of cool, but they've now tacked on the Metro tiles on the side of the start menu. So on the left-hand side of the start menu, you have the traditional list of all your apps, and you can do a quick search like you used to be able to, which has got a bit more powerful as well. So if you hit the Windows key and start typing, the search has got more powerful. But on the right-hand side of the start menu, they've added all the Metro tiles that you used to see when you pushed the Windows button before and switched to Metro mode. So you can kind of jazz up your start menu, I guess. But it's the old-fashioned start menu with these tiles on the right-hand side. So if you had an email tile, it'll tell you how many unread emails you've got. And you might have a tile which is for the weather app, and that will obviously just give you the weather on the tile. for today or tomorrow, and then if you click on it, you run the full app. So that's one of the features.
So it's a little bit like widgets.
Yeah, I guess so. But it's kind of specifically, they call them Metro tiles because they only launched the Metro apps. So they're kind of widgets, and they used to live on the start menu on the old Metro sort of mode. But they're essentially widgets at heart, but they are linked to Metro apps and not real apps.
But in terms of like functionality, like they display like what's happening in real time on the tile kind of thing, which is, but they can open up into like bigger, fancier things. So they're like widgets with extended functionality kind of thing.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of leads into the next change, and the next one is where you can now run those Metro apps in a window. So it used to be that if you run a Metro app, it had to be full screen, and that was obviously again for the tablet users. But now you can run these Metro apps in a window, so you can just run them like a regular desktop app. And obviously they look a bit big and goofy because they're typically designed for tablet. That's kind of what the Metro side is for. But it's kind of cool that now you don't have to basically pick between using a Metro app or your desktop. So I'll quickly run through the other features, which are not nearly as big, I don't think, really. I mean, in terms of usability and what users will see. But they've added virtual desktops now, which has obviously been on Linux for 15 years and on Mac for 10. They've also added the ability to snap windows to the corner of the screens. So if you drag a window to the top left corner, it will just take up exactly 1/4 of the screen, which is quite a cool feature.
Yeah, that's useful. Yeah,
definitely targeted at one monitor users, but actually there's a lot of people who only use one monitor, and it's quite nice to be able to. If you look at my desktop now on Mac, I must have like 10 windows open. They're all just splattered everywhere. They've also they've upgraded the search feature, and they've kind of added a bit of candy around all the alt tabbing and things. So I mean, obviously there's a lot more features under the hood, but I think they're the really big ones. And obviously they've upgraded all the usual stuff. Like Internet Explorer's got a few more features, and the command prompt is a bit more fancy. Sure. But yeah, I mean, it's an overall upgrade. But I think it's the Metro apps, the start menu, and the kind of search and the virtual desktops. Those are the kind of main things. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've not seen any of this in action myself, but from the sound of it, it sounds. I don't know, it just sounds quite, positive, but superficial, if you know what I mean. Whereas something like Windows 10, you'd expect them to announce something. I mean, there may be more fundamental stuff going on, but I realise they have to sell it to tech users as well as like the general public. So they have to say, hey, look what you can do with it now. So people don't say, well, why the hell would I want that? Well, we've redesigned the way the registry works and blah, blah, blah. Oh, not interested. But I know they probably haven't redesigned the way the registry works. But you see my point. I mean, my concern is that like it's not really the most it seems to be doing is legitimizing or like atoning for mistakes they're admitting they've made previously, if you know what I mean. I mean, I'd be interested to hear about like all the other great changes that have come with it if they're finally like addressing certain things about the way it works. But there again, I haven't got much experience with Windows 8, so I don't know how much of that got fixed in between. So no, I'll be honest, I'm speaking from a position of ignorance really, but I don't know, whenever I hear that sort of like marketing BS, it just I immediately go on full alert, you know what I mean?
So I guess one thing they're trying to push for, and I can see the direction they're going in, and unfortunately I don't really have experience as to whether this goal has been hit, but what they really want to do is make the experience kind of the same. So whether you're picking up Windows on a phone, tablet, a desktop, your media TV, PC, or maybe even one day the Xbox One. They kind of want the experience to be as similar as possible, and not before where it's kind of had a few common themes, but wasn't the same.
Oh, I don't know. So, I think that's a mistake. I think trying to normalise it across the whole thing, I think it's a bit of an exercise in futility.
No, I think well, first of all, actually, that's not really very difficult to do. You know what they're trying to do there. If they just have what they want to do is give Mark Shuttleworth at Canonical a ring, and see if they can get a copy of Ubuntu, and then just brand it up, because Ubuntu, of course, runs on your server, your desktop, your tablet, your Nexus 7, your phone, and it's unified across the whole thing. So. Maybe Windows, maybe Microsoft should have a chat with the guys at Canonical and get fixed right up.
But I guess
it's quite funny if
the user
Windows really was
interface.
just a shell over it.
Well, that's essentially what Mac, right? Mac basically their own custom machine over the top of Linux, which is why it's so good. Because Apple, when they did OS 10, they basically went, it's time to get roughed and just use a solid foundation. I think it's FreeBSD essentially where it started, and then they just put their own Windows machine on top, saying make it black box.
So which version of Debian is Microsoft building Windows 10 on then?
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Well, because I'm buying into it, I mean, if there's obviously, look, I can be very straightforward about this. If there's a relationship between the kernel architecture, between the code base of the Windows 10 kernel architecture at central core and Windows 8 and Windows 7 kernel architecture and central core, and what I mean by a relationship, I mean, even if they were in the same repository at some point in the past, that's a strong enough relationship for what I'm talking about, then frankly it's dross and I'm not interested. If, however, they've been and checked out a copy of OpenBSD and then they've dropped the Windows Aero stuff on the top, well then, then we're talking, and I certainly so bringing the laugh and jokes and kind of satirical nonsense to a close, what I would say is that the introduction of this virtual desktop idea, I think from a usability point of view, that's a bit of a boon. I really do thrive off those virtual desktops in KDE. I use them a great deal. So that could well be interesting from a usability point of view, and I think that what you were saying about the Metro apps in actual fact, they were just. I remember we did a show when we first looked at Windows 8, and it was like we were like, what is going on with this thing? It was just really hard to get your head around it, and on in the desktop setting, the desktop PC setting, it was just way too much.
Yeah.
It clearly needs to be there for the tablet space and for the Surface and so on and so forth. So they've turned that down a little bit and made the two more usable. Then it's certainly worth a look. And I don't know, I am actually tempted to download the ISO and just run it up in a virtual box, just to have a cheeky look, I
think it's a worthwhile experiment just to see. I mean, again, I guess the core problem, like with Windows and why they can't chuck away their old 20-year-old legacy code is probably not even. I mean, there's obviously the wide app base that would break, but most of those you could just run in the virtual machine. So if they did kind of like what they did with Windows 7 or whatever it was, or where they might even do, I think it's 7, where they really packaged it with a virtual machine to run your old apps. Now, that's fine for most things. So if they went, right, whole new architecture, but like Mac did, they had that kind of Rosetta system where you could run PowerPC apps on Intel through kind of built-in emulator. But obviously, so much of the consumer market for Windows is because of games, and they're going to run like a pig in an emulated environment. And obviously, if they lose the gamers, that's if the gamers start flocking off to Linux and Mac, then all the big AAA games start getting made for Linux and Mac, and no one's got a reason to buy Windows anymore. At least from the the kind of nerdy people like me users, as opposed to all the other apps could still work. So people who are like working in an office wouldn't even notice if they did it right that they were still running an old app and it's half the speed. Because who cares if Word is running at half speed? Still 10 times faster than it needs to run, right?
But that is, you make a really good point there, John. And me and a few friends of mine in the business community, one, Bill Wilson, a good friend of mine, who runs a company called Ilum up in North Devon, and we were talking years ago about the change in Microsoft's strategy, because for many years, they'd done Windows NT. There was a big strategy on Windows Server and all of the other corporate products. But Microsoft always had a vision of a PC in every home. That was the idea. That's the market space that we're trying to get to, the big consumer market space. And nowadays, that's the business sector is. It's unfair to say that it's not important to Microsoft, but it isn't as mission critical to the business strategy as that PC in every home, and that's the reason, the reason I believe they've got the Xbox and the Xbox One and everything else. So this point that you make about games being crucially important to the Microsoft model is absolutely spot on, and that locks them into this technology paradigm for exactly the point that you've made. And I think it's impossible to see them being able to move away from the code base that they've got and do those kinds of things like that Apple did back in the day. I don't think they would have the option to do that.
Which is a shame, because I think the OS could really grow if they did that. But
yeah, it might be best just to give it a good old chop off at the trunk and make something new, because that would be something you could really sell if you're looking to stop an eventual die-off in terms of like loyalty. If like a lot more feasible alternatives start coming out, they might start. I mean, they'll never go out of business. They'll never go hungry, but they may find themselves losing ground unless you start like planning ahead. It's like, how can we maybe they probably already thought of this. They've got smart people working there. I'm sure they think like 50 years ahead, but. That would be an excellent way to do it. Say, hey, no, this isn't the Windows this isn't your daddy's Windows. This one works.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Right. So, I guess the bottom line is that maybe it's worthwhile downloading the ISO and taking a look, and maybe we could revisit Windows 10 on the show again and take maybe a little bit more of a bigger section at looking at it. But let's take a look at this Apple Watch then, John. Tell us about this. I've seen it in the news, a few bits and pieces about it, and I thought, they really need a watch, really. But so what's the score?
Obviously watched the keynote. It might have been 2 or 3 weeks ago now, so quite a while. But I'll see what I can remember off the top of my head. But it was obviously it's very Apple, and by that I mean it's both kind of flash and a nice design, but also it's at the heart of the Apple ecosystem. So if you've got an Android phone, it's not an option for you really. The idea is obviously it's going to be kind of a watch device, not too dissimilar, I guess, from the recent Samsung type ones. But using those kind of smart watches as a base, I guess it's probably easier to talk about the differences than it is to talk about it from scratch. But the idea is obviously it's got a very colourful, high resolution screen. And the whole system is running on one chip. And I don't mean that in the same way that an iPad has a system on a chip, which is actually the CPU, GPU, and the RAM. This is everything is basically one chip. So absolutely every part of it is all kind of based on one chip, and that makes the device very small. And I guess most of it's just a battery, but they haven't made any note on battery life yet. But the idea is that it's kind of an external screen for your iPhone, I guess, or iPhone or iPad. I guess that's probably the best way to think about it. So it's going to run. So apps on your phone or your iPad, and this is a bit of conjecture and extrapolating from what they said in the show, but apps on your phone or iPad will be able to run widgets on the iWatch. So, and we're not really sure what format those widgets will take, whether they will be just kind of like a veneer or a whole app that's compiled. So I'm not sure quite to what extent it will be. But the idea is that you'll run an app on your phone and it will push the widget to your watch. So it will probably run independently then in a kind of lightweight sort of way. But the idea is it's really meant to kind of always be in contact with a phone or an iPad when you're using it. But if we kind of ignore the app ecosystem for now, because obviously I'm a massive developer geek, so that's the first thing I think of. But for your average user, you're going to buy this watch on day one. You're going to put it on your wrist. The first thing it does is all the fitness tracking. So it'll count your steps, and if you go for a run, it will tell you how far you've gone because of the GPS. And it also does your heart rate monitor. So it's got like a little infrared heart rate on there. So it will tell you at the end of your run how many calories you've burned quite accurately. And that's obviously cashing in on the recent kind of popularity of these little fitness wristbands, which already cost about £100. So, and they do nothing except for count your steps because they don't really have screens on things. So, so it's kind of cool that it's got that, but you can read the data without having to go home and sync it. So from a fitness point of view, obviously it's a very expensive wristband, but it does that.
That's not going to work for me, John. I can see that. That's going to go wrong, okay? Because I mean, first of all, I live up a hill, so up the hill when I go down to the shops, right? I can just see it now, right? I go down to the shops with my nice new little Apple phone on, and I go up the steps, and all of a sudden the phone goes, calling your GP. Fitness test on me and decided that, you know, I'm having a coronary or something like this. Yeah, so no, that's not going to work for me. I can't be having things like that telling me what's wrong with me.
That actually sounds pretty good. That's a selling point I hadn't thought of. If I'm about to die, then the phone can tell somebody.
Yeah, if your heart rate stops, it'll be like, hey, what's going on?
That's good. I might just get one just for peace of mind.
So that's kind of one half of it, you know, like this fitness watch thing, and the other half is like, you know, it's going to be a kind of an external screen for your phone. So when you get a phone call, it'll pop up on your wrist. If you get a text message, it pops up on your wrist, and that's not uncommon from the other sort of smartwatch devices. But I guess what does set it apart is that it will display 2 or 3 responses on your wrist, but the watch I think's also got a microphone in. So you can also push the microphone button and talk at your watch, and then Siri will translate that into a text message. So yeah, it's proper like, I've just got a text message. You'll play it or look at it, and then you'll push a button and be like, sorry, Jackson, I'm not up for that tonight. Close. And then it will learn. But then it will learn your responses. So if the text message has something like, do you want to go out for a curry tonight? Then it will just have, for me, it will have yes, hell yes, and definitely, you know. But for most people, it would say yes, no, maybe, you know. And you can tap that response out really quick. But you can obviously also then get your phone out, and if you get your phone out, push a button, because it knows that your watch was looking at the text message, it will come straight up with that text message. So you know, you won't have to then load up the text messaging app. It will just got a message, get the phone, and carry on. So
sure.
So it's kind of that, you know, external screen type thing. But with a microphone built in, so I assume you can make calls as well. You know, if you want to look like a real
hardcore user. Does it have a camera on it?
I don't think so. No, I don't know, but I don't think so.
Well, it's only half effective as a surveillance device then. It's only recording what I say. I mean, you've missed the next one. The iWatch 3G, I'm sure, will have a camera on it.
Just so it can spy on you.
Yeah, and it'll be able to detect when you're lying as well.
But so there's a few cool things it does in terms of interface and things. So because they know it's really small, and obviously a lot of smartwatches don't really do much to help you with that. But they've made the little, I don't know what you call it. I'm going to call it a nubbin on the side, but the dial maybe. So you can push that in.
Back when we used watches.
Might have been a dial.
Maybe. Yeah. Dial nubbin.
But that little guy, so you can kind of scroll with it as well. So you can turn it, and it will scroll or zoom if you're looking at a map. So it gives you a way of doing it without trying to touch a tiny screen like this. You know, like looking at.
Yeah, that would be bad, wouldn't it?
So you just sort of twiddle the little nubbin on the side, and then it'll zoom in and out. So again, in theory, it looks good. We'll have to wait and see, really. But yeah, and then obviously it'll run widgets and apps, and it'll. So if you've got an app that wants to interact with it, so one of the apps they showed off was obviously like a silly little thing, but you can, if you're paired with someone else in the room, then every time your heart beats, it will buzz their arm, things like that. You know?
That sounds quite romantic.
Just as a kind of cool gimmicky thing, but.
It's certainly got. I mean, it's got some cool features from what you were saying there. I mean, the text message thing. I really quite like that. The fact that this, and I can see how the device would be context sensitive. So you've got one single button, but the device knows what was the last thing it put in front of you, so it relates whatever your action is to go back to that. That makes a lot of sense. And if you think about where we've come, I mean. Like, for example, if I wanted to get a message to Jackson, for example, 100 years ago, I would have run down with the text, written it down, and like taken it to the GPO, and a little telegraph man would have gone, sent it over the Morse code to the, the Newton St. Sire's telegraph office, and they would have, done that, this, that, and the other, and then we've come through iterations and iterations to now where you can, like the telex, where you used to type into the telex and then it would phone up over the acoustic coupler and send it back, and then we got to email, and now you've got text messages, and the text messages have got so good now that somebody like Jackson could send me a text message, and then I could just speak to the phone, and it would turn that into a message and send it back. And what they're going to do in a minute, right, is that Jackson will be able to press a button on the watch, and it'll phone my other watch, and Jackson's voice will come out, and he'll be able to say, "Hey Rick, do you fancy a curry tonight?" And I'll go, "Hey Jack, that sounds like a really cool idea." And I'm sure I saw a patent on that kind of thing by this Graham Bell bloke. There was a Bell bloke that did that. But yeah, I mean, the technology is really getting there.
The iPhone combined with the iWatch 4 is going to like fire a smoke signal outside. That nubbin will open up and it'll just fire a smoke signal into the sky.
It's quite interesting though, because I can see the use for. I was talking to someone the other day, and they're a lawyer, and they've got friends who are lawyers too, and they're saying that they have smartwatches and they're really useful because if you're in court or something, you don't want to have your phone out all the time, but you do want to get your important messages, so you can just have your watch and look down at your watch. But the Apple Watch will vibrate apparently, so you'll feel the message coming in without having to necessarily bother anyone in the room. So I can kind of see, even though it's going to be an expensive toy, I can kind of see kids getting these things so they can piss around in classrooms and things.
It's certainly a lot more surreptitious than than pulling out your phone to look at it. If somebody wants to check something a bit more discreetly, looking at your watch is still like, people see it as looking at a watch rather than, they notice you checking the time and they say, "Where's you got somewhere to be or something?" So I suppose it's just a little bit more discreet. I mean, a lawyer getting out his phone is a bit more in your face, isn't it? So I guess I can see that. Getting out your phone's a very deliberate action. Plus, you have to take it out of your pocket. And if people, I don't know, maybe people are worried about like dropping it when they take it out or something. Like if they march everywhere.
Do you know, John, and on the screen, because you said like there was a button on the watch, but do you know if is the watch got a touch screen so that it has?
So it's got this kind of crown, so that you don't have to touch it with two fingers. The crown, that's what they call it. And but it's also a touchscreen watch. So
the crown.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that use case scenario that Jack was talking about there. Where you've got a lawyer in a courtroom, or for example, you're in a meeting maybe with perhaps a board meeting or whatever, where you really don't want to be disturbed. And whereas there's a tiny little sensation, like a little buzz or something on the watch, and then you're sitting there, you just take a discreet look at the watch, put your finger on the screen, go, it's like Jack saying, "Do you want to go for a curry?" And so you just flick up to the hell yes, and you whack that one, and it sends it back, and you can see actually where that is. Totally inobtrusive, wouldn't really upset the equilibrium and allow you to have that kind of more immediate communication, that perhaps than leaving the phone in the bag and responding to messages and stuff a little bit later. So that's kind of quite a cool feature.
And it can, apparently one of the interface type things is that it can differentiate between a light tap or a heavy tap. So I guess, again, trying to get rid of the fact that it's a small screen, I think they want to make it so that you can kind of, if you just want to, I don't know, sort of, open up a picture or view it full screen or something, you can differentiate between a quick tap or a bigger tap. So I guess that will feature in some of their interfaces. I don't know. I think the biggest problem with the watch, because all these features are quite cool, but the fact is the screen's tiny and you've got to try and interact with it somehow. So it's cool that they're going to propose solutions, like responses to messages. But if Jack asks you what sort of curry do you want, it's not going to say Vindaloo and Boona or Rogan Yosh, at least not until you've trained it. So you wouldn't be able to type that back at it. I don't know if it's going to have like a tiny keyboard or you have to use a talkative. I just don't know, That's kind of a...
Well, we'll have to see, but I mean, I think that it was difficult to see really with the where the kind of iPhone iPad paradigm was going to go in terms of what's the next iteration of consumer product that Apple needs to bring to the market space to keep and maintain that kind of market share. And I guess a phone is a logical conclusion, or maybe something with the Google Glass kind of idea, the Apple eyeglass or something. I don't know what on earth that would be, but that's some sort of device like that.
Goggles.
Because Apple are cool, aren't they? I mean, in fairness, Apple know how to design a top device that is just kind of bijou and everybody wants to wear it. So if Apple were to come up with an Apple eyeglass type of sort of headgear, preferably not something that I've designed in my workshop, I think they may well get away with that. So we'll see. Be interesting to see how the sales will be the ultimate thing, won't it? Is that if people go out in droves with their like they did with their iPhones and buy millions of these things, then job done, isn't it? Really.
Cool. So I think that pretty much wraps up the watch.
As long as it doesn't bend, it should be fine.
Will it bend?
Will it bend? That's a good one.
But no, so I think, as a developer, I'm probably going to get one anyway, because a friend and I got an idea for an app for it. So obviously, nice new device. If we can get an app out that's semi-popular, could make some cash. So I've got an ulterior motive of purchasing it. But I think it could be quite cool, and I'm always willing to spaff a bit of money on a bit of new technology and see if it's any good. So, obviously, just do it for AtRandom. That's the only reason I'm doing it. So I'll bill you guys for a third of it.
Yeah, so at this point, I should point out to the viewers and listeners and tell them about the PayPal donate buttons that aren't on our website. But obviously, we do need all the support that we can get. As you'll notice this evening, that none of us have got beer. That's because, in actual fact, of course, it's £7 a pint now, and we can't afford it. So.
The buy me a beer button has gone up considerably since I was in the UK.
Speak for yourself. I got mine on a trip.
Do you know? I've just gone off and had a mad tangent idea, but I've been watching this thing in the news about these gamers that have been pranking each other in the States by calling in the American SWAT teams that bust in the doors and this, that, and the other, right? And I suddenly thought to myself, that's what's happened to our buy me a beer button. You press the buy me a beer button, and instead of it taking $2.50 out your account or whatever, the beer is so expensive now in Sweden. They buy me a beer button, and within 30 seconds, a gang burst in the door with a armed gang and start loading up your TV and all the other stuff, and they're all wearing buy me a beer T-shirts or something like this, and they rob all your gear. So. Oh dear. I've really got to get that imagination under control. I better not drink any more of that Pepsi Cola, I don't know.
Switch to Coca-Cola.
Cool. So I think it's a good time to revive that feature we used to do, where we used to do an app review in the show.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
So maybe we can just pull up an app and just sort of wrap it up in a minute and see if we can describe it.
Sure. Okay. Well, look. Here's a little recommendation that I've got, and I'll put forward, especially for people who are listening to the podcast. This is an Android app. It's called Beyond Pod, and you can get it from the Play Store. It's available in 2 versions, so you can get a free version, which isn't crippleware. It does work very, very well. There are 1 or 2 more heavy-duty features that are missing from it, and obviously it's got ads in it, and for a couple of quid you can have the ads removed and so on and so forth. But it's got loads and loads of channels all already built into it, so CNBC, BBC, just tons of podcatcher channels, so you can get all of the standard kind of core podcasts that are available and download them all onto the phone. Obviously you can load the RSS feed from our AtRandom website, and it'll pull all of these shows in for you. It's just a really good tool. It does work really, really well, and you can set it up and get it to schedule to download so many shows and keep so many shows, and loads of cool features for organising your podcasts, and you can set it to play back to back and do all kinds of things. It's really quite functional. Great laid out UI, and I really love it. I've been using it for a while. I paid for the full version. I've got all my podcasts on it, including the AtRandom show, because I like to listen to myself talking. And so that it's in the show notes. It's called Beyond Pod, and you can find it on the Google Play Store. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. I think it's awesome.
Awesome, cool. So I'm going to bring a bit of a left field app to the table, and it's not one that I've had much time using, but I've used it a little bit, and my friend told me about it, and he said it's kind of been cool for him, and it's called Chains. And the idea is that it's kind of based around the idea that it takes 2 weeks to change a habit. So you're giving up sugar or something, and or you're giving up Coke, say, the drink, not the.
Too quick for me, John. Carry on.
But I can relax now. That's all right then.
You wouldn't want to give the other one up. You could thought no. But no. So yeah, if you're say you're giving up Pepsi, that's topical. Then
Sponsor.
You would. That's a pint. That's $3,000 a pint. No, so you would set up a chain for your app, and the idea is that every day that you log that you haven't had any, and then so you log in and say, I've kept this chain going. And it's kind of, I guess, based around the wristband idea in the same way that the Nike Fuel Band or whatever tries to encourage you to do something every day, because after 3 days of doing it, you're like, I don't want to break the chain because then it'll go down to 0 and I've lost. So you'd say, I haven't drunk Coke today, haven't drunk Coke today, haven't drunk Coke today. And after 3 days, it'll buzz you and say, have you drunk Coke today? And you'll say, no. And yeah, so the idea is that it kind of helps you with these habits. And my friend's been using it. He says it actually kind of worked for him because he's been kind of giving up sugar most days of the week. So you can say, my intent is to give it up, but maybe only 5 days of the week. So at the weekend I don't care, but in the week I don't want to have more than one sugary treat a day. So he gets his phone out 5 days a week and pushes the button. And he uses it for a few things. So he runs his own business. So he's like, I want to make sure I do my accounting once a week. So he has it set up on a Friday to buzz him and remind him to do it. And if he does it, that's great. The chain keeps going. And if he fails, he gets a black mark on his record sort of thing. So I guess it's slightly gamifying real life, But yeah, that's called Chains, and you can download it definitely for iOS. I'm almost certain it's available for Android too. And the idea is it's really simple. You just download it, you set up your chains, and then daily you can tick it. And the dream is that after you kept the chain of 2 weeks going, so sort of 40, maybe 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, then hopefully you've kind of changed a habit, or you've begun to change a habit on your regular life. So I think that's kind of true. I think if you do give up something like Coke, it only takes about a week or two before you don't miss it anymore. So.
Yeah, I tend to think that, they say that 35 repetitions, isn't it, or 35 repetitions or 35 days of doing the same thing will forge a new habit, or get rid of an old one and replace it with a new one. And so what you need is the prompting, isn't it? You need something that just keeps you going on the straight and narrow. That sounds like it would do it. Where's that Pepsi gone?
Drink as much as you can, Rick, because tomorrow you're going to have to start giving it up.
Yeah.
So how about you, Jack? Have you had any new apps recently? Any new cool?
Well, I thought I'd try out this one called Contraction Timer. just on a whim.
How's it working out for you, Jack? How are your contractions?
They're strong, long, and regular. So it's time to go in. No, it's a very, very basic free app, and I won't spend very long on it before I get to my real app, because there's a million of these sorts of things available for the on Android and iOS. But yeah, very simple. It's you basically have a timer at the top. You push start, and it measures like the nice thing about it is it measures the history of everything that's happened with the contractions so far. So you can like look at trends and everything, and that's quite handy. But right, joke app out of the way. Serious now. The real one is TV show faves. Now this one It's a yeah, it doesn't sound as serious, but basically, it's an app that lets you keep track of all of your favourite shows, when the schedule of them when they're coming on, and which shows you have and haven't watched so far. If you're like the person who likes to record it all onto your digibox first, and then like marathon a bunch of them all at once or something. So and there is a basic version and the paid for version. The basic version has most of the features, but to be honest, for the extra convenience of like the automatic notifications of when shows are coming on, it's worth just paying a couple of quid for it. This is on Android, and I forget the price of it. I can probably look it up here, but it's really quite neat. You basically search for shows by name, and then it can just find them for you, and then you can see like all the shows that are upcoming, all the ones that have recently gone. It's really quite comprehensive, considering it's quite a something you consider quite basic. They've put quite a lot of effort into making like robust, quite informative. I'm just trying to find the price of it here, but it's I will recommend getting the full paid version if you're one of those people that marathons everything. Everything on TV is a marathon these days, isn't it?
Yeah. That's pretty cool, though.
No, I can't find the price of it. I should say, because I purchased it, I can't find out the price of it. I don't know how that works.
That'd be a disaster for me. That thing. See, because my wife, Ali has she has control of the television, and she watches all her shows. So I could get that little app, and it'd just keep pinging up and just breaking my heart and saying, "Look, you've missed Airwolf again." the new series of Street Hawk. You're not watching that either.
The new series of Street Hawk.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, the rerun of Dukes of Hazzard. Oh, no. Gone, missed again, gutted.
My TV life is flashing before my eyes.
Awesome.
Oh dear. Go, flesh.
Oh, that's cool. So we'll make sure that links
I like
for
the juice
that are available in the podcast notes, so you guys can check them out.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, right. Well, look. So onto the main section, right? So today I have a problem that my co-conspirators in the AtRandom Podcast, I'm hoping, can help me with. So I am in the market for a new graphics card to go in my iRacing simulator, which is a Windows 7 PC, which I know. But frankly, iRacing does run on Linux, but I've been having some problems with some artifacts, some Polygon artifacts that I simply couldn't get rid of. And maybe something to do with the AMD driver under Linux, the binary driver or something. But the application was running under Ubuntu using Wine, and it was running really, really well. And everything was working except for this one little graphic bit. So I had to revert to using it out of Windows because I mean, if you go back into our show archives where I talk about the iRacing show, iRacing simulator back in the day, I am totally obsessed, possessed by motorsport simulation. It is, and it's not a game. This is, I have to say, you'll upset me if you start talking about the iRacing game. This is not a game, right? This is serious. It's NASCAR sanctioned, right? Anyway, I'm rubbish. I'm rubbish at this game, and it's the graphics card. That's why. I'm clearly an amazing driver. It must be the graphics card that's letting me down. I can't get enough frame rates or whatever. So I started looking for new graphics cards, and it's like a well, I might as well have gone off down to the shop and said, look, I'm in the market for a fusion reactor. What do you recommend? And all of a sudden somebody comes out and says, right, okay, well what you need is a accelerated GPU with a 3 kilos, and it needs to have 16 times anti-aliasing and anti-cyotropic, whatever it is, and it's based on a 28 nanometer Tahiti silicon. The Radeon R9 280X features 2048 stream processors based on a graphics core next architecture, 128 Textra memory units TMUs with 32 raster operations, ROPs, and 384 wide GDDR5 memory interlaced and holding 3 gigabytes. AMD's reference clock speed for chips that are 1000 megahertz on the core and 1500 megahertz with 6 giga-Ts on memory, churning out 288 gigabits of memory width per second. What?
Well, you're not listening.
No idea.
That's pretty clear to me.
I would have got that.
Right.
That sounded good. That's
I'm
the one,
lost.
Rick.
So I put a few reference cards up that I've been looking at that I think might be worth a look. So I've been looking at an AMD, the R9 series. There's a 290X and a 280X, and I've put some links to some of these in the show notes. But I wanted to start at the beginning first of all, which is, okay, so I'm in the mode for buying a new graphics card, right? Where do I start? What should I be thinking about?
I guess at the real core, I mean, if you go online and say, what sort of graphics card should I buy, you're obviously going to get either the most expensive AMD or the most expensive GeForce, because they're the best. If you haven't stated your price limit, they're going to give you the best of the two ranges and argue for the side that they back. But I guess the first question you want to ask yourself, and this is the most simple approach, I guess, is how much do you want to pay? And it's kind of like, if you're paying 40 or 50 quid, that's not really for games. Like, might play some old games, but you're really just buying something to take the load off your CPU. So when you're using your computer, if you're spending about 100 quid, that's kind of cool. You're going to get something which can play probably nearly everything, but not at the maximum settings. So for 100 quid, you'll get a card. It'll play probably everything nowadays, maybe not in a year's time, but it will play at medium settings, and for the most intensive games, possibly not at your monitor's native resolution. If you want something really shiny, then that's kind of where the discussion gets more interesting, I guess, because then you're looking at the 200 to 400 pound range, really, and that's where that's when these features really start to set themselves apart. I mean, like, sure, you can look at them on the cheaper cards, and they do make a difference, obviously, because they're all slightly different architecture and features and things. But I mean, really, for a 100 quid card, you're probably going to get something similar if you pay 100 quid to AMD or 100 quid to NVIDIA. But at the higher end is where you start looking at massive price differences for not necessarily much performance difference. And because you're spending so much, you want to be a bit more careful, and you want to start reading into these features a bit more and saying, well, actually, if you're likely to have a dual monitor setup, or even a triple monitor setup, or use the Oculus Rift, you want to start thinking, what do you exactly want to do with your graphics card? Because if you buy the top end graphics card and you're just going to play, because iRacing is a reasonably intensive game, but if you paid 500 quid for the absolute top end graphics card, it's probably overkill, unless you're going to run it on 3 monitors, or if you're going to run it on a 4K monitor, at which point you really do need that extra power. So
okay, right. So first of all, that makes things a huge amount more simpler than the research that I've done online, which has just given me loads of information that I just couldn't get my head around, really. I just didn't understand, and also was finding it difficult to get a point of reference of how do I get a handle on this. So that makes it a lot more sensible. So I do have a budget for this, and the budget kind of runs from like a bottom end of about 120 to 100, say around about 120 pounds. I kind of thought to myself, well, really anything less than that, I've probably already got a card in my machine that will give me that kind of power, because the card that's in the machine at the moment is a AMD HD 7700. So I suspect it came bundled with the machine. It was a £500 gaming machine, so it's not uber powerful, but but it does what I wanted it to do to get me going. And So I sort of thought, well, any less than that, and I'm not going to get any real improvement in performance. At the upper end, really and truthfully, I would be right at my upper limit at 400 quid, really, for a card. I think this would be, I wouldn't really want to spend any more than that to justify that kind of thing. But it's where to position that. So the use case is pretty much like this, which is that I did some measuring performance metrics of which aspects of the PC are being used the most when I'm playing iRacing. And what I found was that even with a full game with, say, 38 people on the track, all driving at the same time, so the PC's got to do all of that networking, draw all of that in, and put it all. The CPU is only doing 25% load, so it's not under any strain there. And it is only using 2.5 gigs of the 4 gigabytes of RAM that are in the box, so it's not running out of memory. But with the settings on about 75% of all the switches, it's giving me about 40, I don't know, say about 41, 42 frames per second, which isn't enough in iRacing.
No, you really need your full 60, right? I mean, if you're playing a racing game where...
Yeah, you do.
There's an additional problem when you're playing games, and this is more prevalent in things like racing games and shooting games, but if you're not running at 60, because obviously the whole game, it's not just the screen that's only running at 40, but it's the whole game that's running at 40 when you're playing at 40 frames. So when you're running at 60, the mouse and keyboard get a chance to input 60 times a second, right? So you're only waiting for 60 milliseconds max for your next input to be read. But if it's running at 40 frames a second, especially if you've got VSync on, then you're actually locking that down to maybe 30 milliseconds before that's an input lag of 15 milliseconds. And it doesn't sound like much, but like when the whole thing's about reacting to cars coming into the side of your field of view and things, you've got the lag of it appearing, which is maybe a frame more than everyone else is seeing, and then another frame lag of your input being read, plus your natural lag, because we're human beings. You can reduce everything but yourself by upping the frame rate, and so it's really important, I think, to have 60 frames a second on a game like iRacing, an experience like iRacing.
Indeed, yeah, an experience like iRacing. Well, certainly, I can certainly tell you that what I did do as I started to look at this problem, I started to then figure out how I could turn things off in the game, and turn some of the settings off in the simulator, not the game, in the simulator, to enable it to render more quickly. So if I turn off some of the mirror views so that it's not having to render a reverse image in the mirrors, then that pushes it back up and to about 61, 62 frames, and that's a big difference. If I'm racing at 40 frames and then I go to 60, the track comes at you much more smoothly, and as a result, your brake markers and the bits where you turn in, which are really important to the speed you can go, become more refined. And so my thinking on this, I started to think to myself, well, in actual fact, I probably want to be actually up nearer 80 frames a second if I could get up to that kind of level.
So your monitor's almost definitely limited to 60.
Okay.
So monitors typically, unless you've got, again, a fancy monitor, they're typically either going to be 60, or if you get a fancy one, then it'll go up to 120 or 144. But there's typically nothing in the middle. So there is, again, another benefit of going to 120, but it is a lot smaller than, if you're hitting 60, the jump from 60 to 120 is visible, but not as much. But you probably need a new monitor to actually get any benefit from that, because even if the picture's being generated 80 times a second, the screen's only showing at 60. So,
is that based on the screen's frequency, like at 60 hertz?
Yeah, precisely. So those extra frames will either be wasted, or actually, even worse, they could cause, in theory, I guess, a bit of shearing if they're not properly synced to the screen's refresh. So typically, if you get over 60 frames a second, then you just turn on VSync, and then the game waits basically, or for the next refresh to show before then it carrying on. So.
Okay, so I'm just having a quick look up here to see what the hertz is of the monitor, which because it's I've got the details of it here. Let's have a quick look. It says 3 milliseconds fast response. Of course, it doesn't say the cycle time, does it? These things never do. But okay, well, let's take that as read then, running at that. Okay, so basically what we want to be aiming for is this 60 frames a second. Right, so that's fine. So the next thing is that in an ideal world for me, I would like to play the game with as much realistic visual as possible. Now, to do that, that means whacking all the settings all the way up to the top, and I would really like to have the mirrors switched on rather than switched off. And and the extra shadows and all the other extra shiny bits and stuff like this. I mean, in fairness to the simulator, there are some things, like for example, it says the high detail in the grandstand where you can see the audience. If you put that into high detail, there's no benefit, because all it does is render a 3D rear. So it renders, it puts bottoms on the on the people, which I mean, I'm not too worried about whether the crowd in the grandstand have got bottoms or not. So we could leave that one switched out, but the rest of them all want to whack them right up, and push it to the top.
So I mean, kind of even just given your budget, but obviously taking the rest into consideration, I think So I've always been kind of a fan of NVIDIA myself. There was a short period where I think AMD were stronger, but I just think that it's a bit like the Intel versus AMD CPU debate. I've always thought the Intel ones are just slightly better. They're more expensive by 10%, but I think they're 10% better. So while it might not be exactly through speed, it might not be like if you get a like-for-like AMD versus Intel chip, then typically there might be the same speed, you've paid 10% more for Intel, but then you go off and do some video encoding, and the Intel's twice as fast. There's these cases where I think NVIDIA is just a slightly more solid, all-round product. And again, it's very much a historical and just gut feeling type thing, but I've just always preferred NVIDIA, and what I know will help with you as well. I think NVIDIA's support of Linux has just always been stronger as well.
I've always had far fewer compatibility issues with NVIDIA, and their support in general, just installing their products feels a bit more robust, a bit more thought through. It feels quite well supported. I mean, you being a Linux man, Rick, I'd definitely recommend NVIDIA over AMD any day.
Okay.
Never had a problem with NVIDIA and Linux. I've had tons of problems with their AMD and Linux in the past, and they might be fixed now. But obviously, I'm basing this on kind of historical knowledge. But also, I think it's kind of it shows how much effort the company puts in, right? And I think NVIDIA have always put in more effort for Linux, and especially with Ubuntu, you just click additional drivers. Make sure you do that, because the built-in driver which you get with Ubuntu is obviously kind of a bit cut down compared to if you just download the binary blob from NVIDIA. But you can do it through the additional drivers app on Ubuntu. Just download that driver, and all of a sudden everything gets super smooth. So based on that, it's actually kind of a good time to be looking at a new graphics card, because NVIDIA have just released a new range. So obviously, graphics cards go through cycles like CPUs, and it's kind of always best if you can buy them at the beginning of a cycle, because then you're getting the best. If you buy it at the end, then something new comes out 3 weeks later, and your one kind of drops in price. But NVIDIA have literally maybe a week or two ago released a new range, so that's really cool.
Well, I was looking at this article here, which I'll pop in the show notes, but this was on Phoronix, and it was basically says the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 980 is the best GPU for Linux gamers. And it's talking all about that, and I have to say, like Jackson just said, I can absolutely speak to NVIDIA with Linux. My Samsung laptop has got NVIDIA chipset in it, and and the 3D and the HDMI out and the dual monitor stuff off the laptop, everything just works. And I just loaded the NVIDIA binary binary blobs in, and I know it's not free software and those kinds of things, but sometimes you just want things to work, and that was the case there. So I am a big fan of NVIDIA. I think the reason why I was thinking at the moment, or looking mostly at AMD stuff, was because I've got AMD in the box at the moment and it's worked quite well, but the box is dual booting with Kubuntu, and so it would probably benefit from an NVIDIA driver, and maybe that might even possibly solve that artifact rendering problem that I was having with iRacing running on Linux. So we'll take that, and we'll say, all right, well, let's go down. Let's say that the choice now is NVIDIA. Right, so we're going to go with NVIDIA as the manufacturer for the reason that we just said. So I'm looking at this GTX. This is a GTX 980 here.
Yeah.
Now, well, it's read 'em and weep, because looking at the budget for this thing, they're anywhere between £550 and £700.
That's the bad news about the NVIDIA 980. However, what I really think you should be looking at is the NVIDIA 970. And I truly believe at the moment that is the absolute best performance per pound you can get out of a graphics card. So that's maybe speed-wise, it's kind of 85% of the 980. So if the 980 runs at speed 100, then this runs at speed 85. So
that would be good.
So you're looking at losing 10 or 15%, but you're also looking at losing more than 50% of the price. So, so you can get a GeForce 970 nowadays with 4 gigs of RAM. So it's got, that's the same as your system RAM, which is kind of crazy. But it's got 4 gigs of texture RAM, so you can get these really high-res crisp textures on there. And the 970 is a really powerful card. And like I say, 10-15% slower perhaps than the 980, but with graphics cards, if you buy the absolute top of the range, you're always paying half your money for the last 10% when you buy the very top one. So you just take one step back from the top card, and you can save half the cash, and you just lose 10%.
Okay. Right. Well, I buy that argument for sure, most definitely. And I'm just looking here at some of these different cards, and these are much better priced. Right, more or less, right in the middle of my budget, really. Around about the sort of 250 to 280, 290 mark for different ones. Now, so they've all got the same. Looks like all got the same chipset in them, but then there are different manufacturers. I can see here Zotac and EVGA and Palette. I was looking. I have a fondness for Gigabyte. I don't quite know why, but maybe because I've just heard the name and they do this shiny picture of a blue eye on their box, which I quite like. But so what are your thoughts on the manufacturers, the different manufacturers of these things, John?
Yeah, so it can get a little bit confusing when you start looking at the individual manufacturers, and for a lot of people there won't really be any difference between them. However, you'll notice that quite often when you're looking at just even one range of cards, there'll be some at, like you say, 250 and then some at 300. That's obviously quite a big leap considering it's the same technology. But typically people like Gigabyte will actually overclock them to get 5% more performance out of them. So that extra £50, you're getting a bit more towards the 980. Which is obviously quite cool because it means you can get halfway between the two just for another 50 quid. And then there's also the kind of cooling system on top. So for the more expensive ones, they typically have a better cooling system, which extends the life of your card and prevents it from overheating when you're playing something that's really performance intensive. So and Gigabyte, I recently read a review of the Gigabyte 970, and it was really solid.
So I'm looking at one here. Now this is a GTX 780, which is that's not the same thing at all, is it?
No, so that was the last generation one. Which obviously, if you had that, it's not a bad card. But you really want to buy a 970 now because there's no point in buying. We post a link here in the chat so you can see the GTX 970 that I'm looking at.
Great. Okay, let's grab a look at this.
And that one's just under £300, and that's the gigabyte version, where they've kind of added an extra fan on top over what you might normally get on the stock one, so that keeps it cooler in your case, which again extends the life of the card and just tends to keep it cooler. So obviously you can kind of run at the top performance for a bit longer before it starts to choke out too much heat.
Okay, so now, so this I like, and I like the budget here. I mean, it's $297, so it's just about it's not the upper top of my budget, but it's more or less there. Now, the other caveat that I had in my mind was I looked at the PCIe card slot on my machine, which is PCIe 2x16 or something. Is that something I need to be careful of?
That is a good question. I know in the past, PCI 2 has kind of been fine for the newer graphics cards, because the graphics cards, even though they are PCI 3, they're still not really running it above PCI 2 speed. Whether or not that's something which is going to hit you with the... I'm just having a very quick look online. So GTX 970 with PCI Express 2. I'm under the impression that it's still not going to be a problem. So I think you might be kind of throwing away 1 or 2% of your card's performance, but I think it's going to be so big that it doesn't really matter. And a lot of it, obviously, once all the data's on the graphics card anyway, it kind of just grinds away on its own. So
right, yeah.
So when you launch your game up, it'll fire a whole bunch of models and meshes and graphics textures to your graphics card, and that's how it's all sitting in the 4 gigs of RAM that's on there. And then when you start playing the game, it's got to, apart from transferring a few bits of data to tell you where to render it and how to render it, then quite a lot of that nowadays will just be stored on the graphics card. So I'm still under the impression that it shouldn't be too much of a problem at all, really, if you're using PCI E2. So.
Yeah. So this looks like the card to go with. Then, in fairness, John, I think we've really drilled this down to the right decision now. Because looking through this, I mean, it's got looks like it's got 3 display ports on it, and 1 HDMI, and then 2 DVIs. So this looks like it would, even if I decided to run 3 monitors, it looks like it would do that.
So I think if you did go into a 3-monitor setup at some point, then because obviously there's just so many pixels on 3 monitors, you probably wouldn't be able to play it completely maxed out on 3 monitors. I mean, it's just a gut feeling, you might, but because obviously again you're pushing 3 times the amount of pixels out of one card. So I suspect if you did try and run it on 3 monitors, you might have to tone a few of the settings down to keep it at 60 frames a second. But what's kind of cool about these cards is that at some point in the future, if you had your heart set on running it on 3 monitors, and you bought the monitors and then you put it in, and it was like running at 50 frames a second, you can actually buy a second card and throw it in there. And obviously in a year's time, they'll probably be £100 cheaper. So, and they'll run side by side in SLI mode, where they kind of join together to work together.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I've seen some of the guys up on the iRacing forums where they've posted rigs like that, where they've got 3 monitors and 2 cards using this SLI option, and they get incredible performance out of that. To be fair, my feeling is that, in actual fact, I mean, I haven't really got any room to put 3 monitors. I'm so wrestling with this Oculus Rift, but I'm not going to talk about Oculus Rift here because I think we should save that to do a show dedicated to looking at Oculus Rift. So this card, I mean, this card here this isn't available until Friday the 31st of October, but it is available by pre-order.
I see. Yeah, it's not even out yet.
But John, I think what we're gonna, I think that'll do for me. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on pre-order and get one of these, and then once I get it and I get it all loaded up, I'll in the next show that we do, once I've got it all set up, I'll revisit it and we'll I'll tell you what the performance is like and what it's doing, and do a little bit of a review on it.
That'd be really cool. So I think, I mean, just theoretically speaking, if one day you did pick up a Oculus Rift, then this will be fine. That card will push it fine, without a doubt. So you'll be able to play it with the Rift, and obviously in a future Rift they might add a higher resolution. But I think at 14, kind of 1440 pixels by 2880, the card will play iRacing maxed out 4K. It might struggle a little bit, but obviously 4K is a horrific amount of pixels. But if you did get a Rift one day, you plug it in and it'll run smooth as butter on that card. So.
Well, that's I don't know. I was talking to my family about one for Christmas, and my wife even said to me the other day. She said, "Well, are you still thinking about this scuba mask?" And I thought, well, I said, "Now, how do you mean?" Is this a scuba mask and flippers that we're talking about?
Yeah, it's just a tough time. If it was final now, I'd just pick one up because it's new technology. But I'm a bit worried about buying something that's obviously still very much open to change. So if you buy one, it's definitely going to be a short-term purchase potentially, because a whole new one might come out in 6 months' time, which has got a whole bunch of features which makes this one look like a toy,
If it's any success at all, then that is exactly what will happen, yeah. And if it's not a success, then you bought like a duff piece of equipment.
So I mean, when the first official one comes out and it's finished, that will probably stay standard for 18 months, 2 years. It's kind of that's an acceptable amount of time, but you just don't know when they're going to turn around and go, "We've got a new development kit," and you're like, "Oh no, just spent 300 quid on it," or 250 quid. So in that respect, a bit of a gamble, but at the same time, what an awesome piece of kit. So I think we should definitely discuss it in a future show.
For sure. Well, just to finish up this segment on graphics cards, I left the show notes with this one question. So I might not even pronounce this correctly, but what is anti-isotropic? In the card checkboxes, there's this anti-isotropic checkbox. What does that do?
I think what
it's a setting that you never ever turn on.
No. Quite the contrary. You try and always turn it on. But
sorry, I never turn it on. That's right.
So it's called anisotropic filtering, and if you're looking at a textured surface, which is a fairly oblique angle to the camera, so if you're looking forward, like you're looking at the front of the car, for instance, then the floor is obviously at a very sharp angle to your kind of point of view, and it will go off into the distance. And if you've got this feature turned off, you'll notice that the floor texture very quickly gets blurry as it moves away from the camera. And that's just by the sort of very nature of the fact of the way that obviously a texture is a bunch of just pixels, and then there's only so many pixels, and then as it moves further away, you've got to kind of try and somehow render a big texture, which might be 1,000 pixels wide, in a bit of screen that's only 100 pixels wide. So if you haven't got any anisotropic filtering, if that's turned off, it will just kind of, quite often it will just pick the nearest pixel and render it. So you end up with this kind of blocky, blurry, rubbish effect. But if you have anisotropic filtering turned on, then the texture, it uses kind of a fancy technique to try and use multiple pixels in the actual texture to render one pixel on the screen. So it will kind of say, well, actually, because we've got this massive texture that's 1,000 pixels big, even though that one pixel, which you're looking at, it actually kind of covers 9 pixels on the texture. Does that make sense? So if you take a poster and you hold it to your face, then obviously you can see, and you have it on the screen, you can see 1 pixel in 1 square, and you sort of turn it that way and move it away from the screen, and then you've got to think, well, actually at the back of that square, one pixel on the screen is actually representing a whole bunch of pixels in the texture. So then you can either just look at 1 pixel in the texture and whack that on the screen, which is very quick, because you sort of say, well, we're closest to this one, so we'll just show 1 picture, but then you've got kind of bits missing from your texture. Or you can say, well, actually, okay, we'll do a really clever resizing so that we can sort of shrink the text down. It's a bit similar in Photoshop. If you're resizing an image, you can do it fast, which doesn't it looks a bit rubbish, but it's very quick. Or you can do it in a clever way, and it will sort of say, okay, you're resizing an image which is 1,000 pixels down to 100. So you could either just take 1 in 10 pixels out and use that, but then you're missing loads of data. Or you can shrink it down and try and estimate what it would look like in fewer pixels. So it's kind of doing that, and you can do it in varying degrees of accuracy. So that sort of from the perspective you're looking at it, you can try and make it look better. So essentially, for your perspective as a gamer, as the road disappears into the distance, it will look, if you've got it turned off, it will start to look muddy and blurry and a bit wishy-washy pretty quick. If you've got it turned on, then it will look a lot better. I won't say really crisp and smooth, but it will look a lot better as it fades off into the background. So it's really for floor and the grass when you're playing a racing game.
Got it. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense, and it's anisotropic filtering, not anti-isotropic.
Yeah, but with your GeForce 970, you'll definitely be able to have that feature on. I mean, that's the sort of features you can look forward to with your GTX 970.
It should be awesome. Okay, so I suspect it's going to probably, I'll get it on pre-order and probably rock up at some point in November or something, and I'll get it fitted in the machine, and we'll see where it is then. So, well, guys, I think we're just about out of time, and we're out of show notes as well. And but yeah, so that's rather good. I mean, there's an outro section here that says, "Tum-ti tum 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 tum." Is this something Winnie the Pooh or something like this?
I thought Jackson was going to do a song to end off the show.
That's it. Yeah, tum-ti tum tum tum. I took forever writing it. I did it in between doing the washing up, hanging up the towels, and
making a baby.
Well, of course, there's in fact, I think that it's almost on the cards that by the next show you will have a baby to help you with that washing up and folding of the towels, Jack. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm hoping this baby's gonna have a few topics to contribute. I'm gonna give her a few tech magazines and say, come up with something, and she's gonna be writing a good portion of my material in future. So if I don't know, if people complain about like a change in tone, then that's where it's coming from.
Oh, fantastic. Well, what we're going to do is for those of you that are listening to this on the podcast, if you downloaded it from the website, which will be available at some point in the future. We haven't got a time machine or anything, but getting ahead of ourselves there. But maybe the guys at Oculus Rift could start working on that next. But yeah, so anyway, for those of you listening on the podcast, we're going to hand off now, and we're going to leave you with another track from the amazing Magnatune, magnatune.com, which is like a kind of open source kind of music place. But I'm going to hand over to the other guys to say cheerio, but I'm just going to say it's been great talking about graphics cards. Really love being back on the AtRandom show. I'm Rick Timmis. I'll see you all soon.
Cool. Thanks for listening, guys. It's been great to start a new season. So I've been John Wordsworth, and thanks again.
I'm Jackson Matthews, and this was At Random, the Second Coming.